You cannot spend your way out of recession or borrow your way out of debt. I just think there is so much irrational pessimism in the world. It's irresponsible to scare EU nationals in the UK by hinting that their status might change after Brexit. The truth, Prime Minister, is that you have run out of our money. The country as a whole is now in negative equity. Every British child is born owing around £20,000. Servicing the interest on that debt is going to cost more than educating the child. On any measure, Spain's bank rescue has been a disaster. €100 million have been added to the national debt. 10-year bonds are at a record high and the country's credit rating has been downgraded 3 notches. The complexity of a tax system is every bit as damaging to competitiveness as the overall tax rate. The more convoluted the tax code becomes, the more time we have to take off work to comply with it. Foreign writers, especially Germans, often feel that Shakespeare is really one of them, that he was somehow accidentally born in the wrong country. In much the same way, leftists sense in their bones that he was a radical, rightists that he was a Tory. After Margaret Thatcher's funeral, I spoke at a tribute meeting organized by her supporters in a pub next to St. Paul's. Every human on the planet is descended from both slaves and slave owners. What makes Britain unusual is not that we engaged in the disgusting trade, but that we eliminated it. Our political institutions led us, earlier than many, to the conclusion that freedom was the highest virtue. You cannot carry on forever squeezing the productive bit of the economy in order to fund an unprecedented engorgement of the unproductive bit. When you repeat, in that wooden and perfunctory way, that our situation is better than others, that we're well placed to weather the storm, I have to tell you that you sound like a Brezhnev-era operatic giving the party line. Prime Minister, I see you've already mastered the essential craft of the European politician, namely, the ability to say one thing in this chamber and a very different thing to your home electorate. Political reporters no longer get to decide what's news. The days when a minister gave briefings to a dozen lobby correspondents and thereby dictated the next day's headlines are over. Now, 1,000 bloggers decide for themselves what is interesting. If enough of them are tickled, then, bingo, your news. $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there, and pretty soon you're talking about real money. The U.S. states that allow for citizens' initiatives tend to have fewer laws and lower taxes than the ones that don't. But the beauty of the system is that it encourages the spread of best practice. Whenever the debate moves on to hard numbers, our deficit with Europe, our surplus with the rest of the world, our Brussels budget contributions, the tiny part of our economy dependent on sales to the EU, the vast part subjected to EU regulation, Euro enthusiasts quickly shift their ground and start harumphing about influence. The EU in a nutshell is a miscellany of facts and anecdotes about the system which rules us. It's a book you can delve into in pursuit of a particular fact or crack open for entertainment at virtually any page. The statistics might have a Eurosceptic cast, but they are not exactly a fun read. Few of us want to wade through ONS graphs or European Commission tables. Most British people are keen to remain in a European free trade zone, and most EU states are keen to keep us there, because we buy from them more than we sell to them, to the tune of 40 million per day. The idea seems to be to use the next treaty talks to strike a grand bargain. Britain will be helpful to those states wishing to establish a fiscal union among themselves if, in exchange, we can amicably derogate from the aspects of the EU which we dislike. The Robben Island Bible has arrived at the British Museum. It's a garish thing, its cover plastered with pink and gold Hindu images, designed to hide its contents. Within is the finest collection of words generated by human intelligence, the complete works of William Shakespeare. The anti-apartheid prisoners on the island, like so many in every age and nation, found that Shakespeare had a peculiar ability to gentle their condition. They used to gather clandestinely to read the plays. On one occasion, the book was passed around for each man to mark his favorite lines. New fathers, political prisoners, traumatized presidential aides, resolute schoolboys, MEPs addressing unfriendly chambers, we all find that Shakespeare has magically anticipated our precise circumstances. How he was possible, I still don't understand, but there isn't a day I'm not grateful that he speaks to me in my own language. I am not the Conservative Party's healthcare spokesman. I'm fond of Andrew Lansley, and I strongly support David Cameron as party leader. There comes a point when threats become so overblown that they serve to irk, rather than to frighten. Progressives and conservatives alike lean, unconsciously, towards particular conclusions, and then scrabble around to rationalize those conclusions to themselves. The further left you are, the more your concern for the underdog crowds out everything else, leading you to overlook inconsistencies. You might, for example, argue for immigration and multiculturalism in the UK, but not in the Amazon. You might demand equality before the law and, at the same time, gender quotas. The fact that Thomas Jefferson owned slaves doesn't devalue what he wrote. That's the problem with very high taxes. They don't redistribute wealth, they redistribute people. One way to think of the tax system is as a massive Swiss cheese. Each hole is an exemption created by a chancellor in pursuit of good headlines, a hole waiting to be filled by the clever accountants who work for Starbucks or Jimmy Carr. European pantywaists might keep voting for high-spending governments, but the U.S. was founded on a popular revolt against taxation. Conservatives the world over need to grasp the difference between being pro-market and being pro-business. Sometimes the two positions happen to coincide, often they don't. The Tea Party movement and the Occupy movement were both, in a sense, complaining about the same thing, namely the use of public money to rescue failed banks. It's not often one gets the chance to write this, but when it comes to the bailouts, especially the Euro bailouts, Marxists are right. Working people are being forced to support a privileged few. A minister is supposed to be there to remind his permanent officials that they work for the rest of us. If, instead, he becomes the cabinet champion and public spokesman for his department, democracy is vitiated. I am, Guardian readers keep telling me, a xenophobe. Never mind that I speak French and Spanish, that I love Europe, that I've lived a high proportion of my life abroad. The fact that I oppose the political amalgamation of the European Union's states is ipso facto proof that I dislike foreigners. In my experience, Eurosceptics are likelier to have lived abroad and to have entered fully into other cultures than Euro enthusiasts, many of whom seem to have latched on to the EU as a way of compensating for their poor language skills. I've absolutely no idea where Courvoisier is, but I'd imagine La Pollard de Courvoisier is some kind of chicken. Nobody likes a smart aleck, which is why it's always better for your career to be wrong and in company, rather than right and on your own. The populists always fail in their own terms. Let me be more specific. The protectionists always fail. They always end up delivering the sharpest fall in living standards to the people who are their biggest supporters. There is sort of a Hobbit-like element to a lot of British people. They don't want to be told something until they have worked it out for themselves. I think public life for me has a slightly didactic role, okay? I'm going to devote myself full time to securing and then winning a referendum on leaving the EU.